Welcome to episode 1 of the Sullivan Healthcare Consulting podcast. The overarching theme of this conversation will be talking about the inside of surgical services and perioperative consulting. To give a little background, my name is Stephen Spake. I am a senior consultant with Sullivan Healthcare Consulting, and I would love to introduce to everyone Randy Heiser, the president of Sullivan Healthcare Consulting. Randy, if you can give us a little bit of your background and how you president of Sullivan, I'd appreciate it.
All right. Well, thank you very much. First of all, I appreciate being here. This is our initial episode, and I'm very excited about a new vehicle that we can use to reach out to our clients, our future clients, as well as past. So a little bit about my background. I have been a healthcare consultant my entire career. So I started working with a consulting firm back in the early 80s, working with productivity and quality metrics and measures, and went to work for a national advocacy firm and ended up going to work for Don Sullivan in 1993. At that point, I started specializing in surgery. Don Sullivan had started the firm back in 1977. He was doing nursing studies, nursing productivity, and he realized a big thing back then, and that was for the presidents and administrators, that was way before we had C-suites, but for the presidents and administrators, the biggest problem they had, most of the complaints were coming into their office from the operating room, but yet they never went there. Nobody ever went past those double doors. So Don decided back in 1977 that he was going to specialize in the operating room. And as a firm, to this day, we remain a perioperative consulting firm. And I started working with Don in 1993. He sold to Johnson & Johnson, became the first service that they offered. I continued growing my career. I went up to Canada for about 6-7 years to build a consulting practice with J&J in Canada. And in 2003, I bought that consulting practice from J&J, went back into partnership with Don Sullivan. I bought him out in 2011, and he passed away in 2014. He has a great name recognition in the operating room, and that's why we kept the name Sullivan Consulting.
Since being the president of Sullivan Healthcare Consulting, what are some things that you personally have seen this company grow to become? And then let's actually, before we go that far, let's go back to 1993 and just say that was a great year because you started with Sullivan Healthcare Consulting, and I think I graduated from Velcro to tying my shoes. So that was an important year for the both of us. So let's talk a little bit about what you've done in your tenure as president of Sullivan.
So that's a great question. Over the last 30-some years that I've been with Sullivan, a lot of things have changed. The biggest change is when we used to go in and do a project with a client, it would typically take 10 to 12 months. We would be lots of time on site, lots of data analysis, all kinds of things that we would be doing, and the project would go on and on and on. Today, when we do a project, we have maybe 2 months. I mean, in most cases, we have 4 to 5 weeks to complete that project. The timelines are so much faster today than they were. Even the things that we talked about, when I first started doing OR projects back in 93, the big thing then was, how are we going to incorporate minimally invasive surgery? And, those laparoscopic instruments are very expensive. How are we going to afford them? Is this just a flash in the pan? Is this laparoscopic stuff going to last? This minimally invasive, I don't think it's going to work right. I don't think it'll do the right thing. It's not the best thing for our patients. These were the kinds of challenges that we were facing then. Today, the challenges that we're facing, we can't find staff. We can't keep our rooms open because we don't have nurses. We don't have techs. We don't have anesthesia. Anesthesia is costing us 10 times more than it did in just 5 years ago. We've got far more competition. We've got 3 surgery centers that are competing with us. Do we build our own surgery center? How do we deal with these? All of these challenges that operating rooms are facing today are far more complex than they were 30 years ago. And what I'm incredibly proud of is Sullivan has grown and evolved and changed to meet those challenges and not just trying to do the same thing we've always done in exactly the same way with exactly the same topics. And we have grown, we have evolved, and we've met the challenges for these clients. And we have to understand the operating room generates about 60% of the operating margin of a fiscally healthy hospital. That's always vital to remember. Almost 2/3 of the margin should be coming from surgery. If it isn't, that hospital is going to be struggling. If the operating room isn't efficient, they're not going to hit that 60% level. They're going to be lower. And when the operating room has lower margins, the hospital has lower margins. That is one of the things that has not changed in the last 20 years since we first started looking at margin in the early 2000s.
No, those are great points. And since we're talking, what we've looked at and how it's evolved over the course of a couple decades, let's stop for a second and talk about what it is that we do as surgical services consultants. And really, I'd love for you to tell me, what that title entails. In so many situations, consultants are viewed, at least in my experience, as the grim reaper that's brought in to cut staffing and increase margin and do all these sorts of nefarious acts behind the closed doors. But I'd like to shine a little light on what we actually do.
So many people believe a consultant is the George Clooney character in that movie, Up in the Air.
I think I missed that one.
It's all about consultants.
Okay.
The other great joke is, if you're not part of the solution, there's great money to be made prolonging the problem. Consultants have a terrible reputation because, for a lot of reasons. Why would a hospital hire a consultant? For a couple of reasons. Number one is a lot of hospitals have people that have been in their positions a very, very long time. They're great people. They're incredibly loyal. They're incredibly competent at what they do. But when it comes time to be doing things different or changing or growing or evolving or dealing with new service lines or facing new challenges that they haven't faced before, some of the greatest OR leaders in the country don't know what to do because they haven't faced it before. And that's where a consultant that has a lot of experience in a lot of different places all over the country can be absolutely invaluable to a program. We've seen it. We've dealt with it. We've faced the challenges in hospitals all over. So when someone calls us and says, I'm trying to figure out how to optimize my schedule, and I'm not even sure I know what's wrong with it, but I know it's not working. We can come in immediately and very quickly diagnose the problem, give them a range of options of how to fix it based upon what we've seen work in other hospitals. Everybody does something better than anyone else. And as a consultant, when you go from hospital to hospital, you collect those best practices and then you disseminate them in the next hospital you go to. And that's really the value of a consultant. It isn't that, and not all of us are about cutting staff. I will tell you that in the 30 years I've been working in operating rooms, the number of hospitals, the number of projects that we've done where we've recommended decreasing staffing is probably on one hand.
Every project I've been on, we made the recommendation to increase staffing to meet demand. So
Exactly.
It's fascinating.
And there's a reason for that. Because Sullivan is all about how do we help a program grow? How do we help more patients get care? Most consultants are about how do I save money? Sullivan is always about how do we help you make more money? It isn't just savings. A long time ago, I had a CEO tell me that if it was all about cost savings, I'd shut down the operating room tomorrow and I'd save $30 million. Well, how much margin would he lose? That's a whole nother story. But if it's only about costs, then get rid of the operating room. But if it's about growth, if it's about improving margin, if it's about improving the financial condition of the hospital, that's where Sullivan comes in and say, how do we help you grow? How do we help you do more cases with the resources that you have? And that's, I think, one of the key benefits of a company like Sullivan. We're not in there to cut staff. We're not in there to shave headcount. We're not going to make our fees contingent on how much money we save you this month. We're there about how do we help you grow volume? How do we help you do 20% more cases over the next 2 years? How do we help you attract new surgeons to bring their volume to your operating room?
Yeah, and so much of what we do, like you mentioned, comes from our experience in the industry, our being, the company as a whole. And on that note, we're able to bring a lot of incredibly experienced folks to the table when it comes to recommending and implementing these changes. What are some things related to the composition of your staff that make Sullivan maybe unique in the consulting industry? Do you look for specific qualities or specific certifications or degrees or personnel or personality characteristics when you're adding to the Sullivan team?
That's a very good question. First of all, when it's very difficult to hire somebody into a company like Sullivan when they don't have a surgery background. The terminology, the metrics, the processes are all so different. Again, that's what makes Sullivan different. We hire experienced people. The average age of our firm is older than you would see in other consulting firms. I can't hire a fresh MBA grad, throw them into a client's site, have them bill 3,000 hours in their first year, and expect to stay in business. Because I remember as a very new consultant, and one of the first times I went on site where a charge nurse was telling me about their emergency bunionectomies that they were doing. And I didn't know enough to know she was pulling my leg. So, 30 years ago, when I was a real newbie in surgery, great. I was a management engineer. I was a statistician. I had all of this experience with productivity programs and staffing, but I didn't know surgery. That took me a year or two just to learn the field so I could apply all of my other consulting knowledge to the OR. And that's the big difference. We hire people that really understand surgery. We hire people that understand change management. We hire people that understand what building a consensus is all about. And we hire people that have pretty thick skins because we're not always the most favorite people in a hospital operating room. You always get that, okay, here we go again. Another consultant. What's going to be the flavor of the day? Well, we face that a lot when we first walk into a client site. But when you sit down with surgeons, when you sit down with staff, you start talking about where you've been. You start talking about various solutions. So many times it's like a light bulb goes off. And it's like, this guy gets it. He understands what it's like to be in my shoes. He understands what it's like fighting to try to get a case booked. He understands what it's like to be in this room when you don't have the supplies you need, or you open up an instrument tray and the one instrument you need isn't there, or you go to see a patient in pre-op and you find out that nothing's been done. They understand that we've been there. We know those issues. We've seen them before.
Yeah.
So that's Sullivan consultants tend to be very, very different from other consulting firms.
Yeah, and I especially really appreciate the emergency bunionectomy story. That's a pretty good one. I have a military background, of course, and one of my favorite things to do whenever we got new privates in, like straight out of airborne school or whatever they came from, I would give them a 5-gallon bucket of water and a plunger and tell them to go check for loose tiles in the bathroom. It was just entertaining. There were so many. You could checking Humvees for armor soft spots. So you give them a stethoscope and a hammer and have them walk around the Humvee tapping on it with the stethoscope in just to watch. And so the emergency bunionectomy, I'm going to go ahead and put that in my bag of tricks as well for the next opportunity to haze, which I won't do, I promise. But you're right. And something I've noticed about my team at Sullivan is that they're a very unique intersection of very technically competent and also having the ability to lead and drive that change, because you don't see that all the time, especially in consulting firms. You either have those leaders, those drivers without that technical or subject matter experience, or you have your SMEs that would rather shy away from the requirement to drive groups of people towards a new process or towards innovation. So I think that's something I've observed that's been so important to at least my successes with Sullivan, is watching these very technically capable leaders drive. So it's been very, very important for me to be involved in that. What types of organizations do we often find is being given to?
So the vast majority of our clients are hospitals. They're hospitals, they're ambulatory surgery centers, but they tend to be the operating room. We've done work with physician groups. We've done work with anesthesia groups. We've done work with payers. We did work with a couple of pharmaceutical companies over the years, looking at how do they quantify the impact of their particular drug on OR operations. So we've done those. Very, very rare, very low. 95% or more of our clients are really the hospitals or the ASCs. We're doing more systems of hospitals than we've ever done. It's even, you even look at the academic programs today that all used to be 10 years ago, most academic programs were standalone. Now they've bought up other hospitals, they've expanded, they've created their system where it is a multi-site academic system instead of a single mothership the way it used to be. So we're seeing more systems, we're seeing change in that way, but it's still primarily the hospitals that are our clients. We have been in everything from small critical access hospitals, which have their own unique set of challenges and issues, to incredibly large operating rooms. I think the biggest program we ever worked with had 99 operating rooms in 4 different locations on one campus. But there were 99 operating rooms that all reported to one person.
That's stout.
It was a $140 million budget. And that was 15 years ago.
That's quite a sizable project. Just out of curiosity, which do you find are the more complex typically, the impressively large 80 plus OR projects, or like the 1 or 2 OR projects, some of the rural care facilities, or just different kinds of complex?
They're both very complex in their own way. You deal with a very large system that has 300-400 employees, very large operating room, 40, 50 operating rooms. They may have 300-400 employees. They may have huge budgets. They may have very complex systems, and they face a certain set of complexities and challenges. But you go to a 2-room OR out in the middle of nowhere, and they have their own set. They can't recruit staff. Everybody's wearing multiple hats. I don't have a scheduler and a charge nurse and a control desk manager and an educator. I might have one person that has to do all 4 of those jobs and do them well. I'm dealing with, in small operating rooms, I have different surgeon dynamics than I do in the big hospitals. In the big operating rooms, you're one of 120 surgeons. You're not going to be have the same sense of ownership of the operating room that you would if you're one of 7 surgeons in a small hospital. So there's there's complexities in both. They're very, very different, and they are both just as valuable. And I wouldn't say that one is any easier to work with or improve than the other.
That makes perfect sense. As far as your staff composition for Sullivan, do you find that you have people that specialize in certain types of facilities, or that have specific focus areas in what they do, as opposed to just being a kind of a generalist plug-in?
No, it very much is specialized. So in our ASC division, we have people that understand ambulatory surgery centers. They've been administrators. They've been directors of nursing. They've been business managers in ambulatory surgery centers. They know those facilities and those programs. Some of them go over to the hospital side. Some don't. On the hospital side, we tend to specialize based on function. So we have those people that specialize in supply chain or instrument processing or the clinical side or PAT or nursing or governance. We've really expanded our expertise in anesthesiology. And just recently, we brought on board our first anesthesiologist consultant, to help improve the quality of what we're delivering. And as anesthesia has become more and more of a massive challenge for operating rooms, we wanted to make sure we had that expertise on staff. And so again, we've grown, we've evolved, we've moved in that direction just in the last few months.
That's very cool. I'm excited to see him come on board, and looking forward to touching base with him on a couple different thoughts I have. It'll be a good ad for sure. If you had to nail down the top 2 to 4 things that were brought in to solve, what would you say they are?
Well, since I've had 4 calls in the last 2 days exactly about this, it's very easy because they had the same 4 problems. Governance is number 1. Who runs the show? How do we put a structure in place that can develop and enforce rules to ensure that the operating room is running smoothly and efficiently and fairly for everybody involved? That is the number 1 issue. Number 2 issue, pre-surgical screening, PAT, whatever you want to call it. How do we get patients coming in the door that are prepared in advance so that we're not having to reinvent the wheel on the morning of surgery, spending a lot more money than we need to, and delaying cases? Number 3 is anesthesiology. When you look the last 20 years, I've worked with one hospital that did not subsidize their anesthesia group. They were an outlier. They had almost no Medicare, no Medicaid, a tremendously high commercial payer mix because of where they were located, and anesthesia didn't need a subsidy. every other hospital I've ever worked with, and more ambulatory surgery centers, which was unheard of until the last few years, anesthesia groups are requiring a subsidy. Why? Their reimbursement is going down, their costs are going up, and the gap between revenue and expenses gets bigger and bigger every single year. So that's a major issue that we're focused on. And really, I think the number 4 issue that brings clients and hospitals to us is, I'm going to put it into a big hopper called scheduling. I've got more I'm growing. I can't figure out where to put all these new surgeons I've recruited. Everybody says they can't get cases on except in the middle of the night, but yet anesthesia tells me we've got all this white space in the middle of the day. These surgeons have always had X number of hours of block time every week, but in order to keep that with our growth, we're going to have to build 10 new operating rooms. How do we do something different? So all of these issues I lump under scheduling, and that really would be the number 4 topic of what brings hospitals to us.
No, the point on growth is something that I think is incredibly important. As we nationally look to seek to provide additional care to a larger volume population that is moving into the age range that requires additional care. Ever helped an organization move through that growth process, whether it's designing additional facilities, advising them on how to maybe redesign, redevelop, rebuild their current OR? A lot of what we do is non-tangible in terms of, it's a lot of process refinement and things of that nature. Have we ever worked on anything that has a physical component to it as well?
Oh, absolutely. I actually do a lot of the facility planning for the firm, and I've probably designed, again, we're not architects, so we lay out floor plans, we lay out adjacencies, we put together space programs, and we've probably done that with 300 or 400 hospitals over the last 10 years. In many cases, it's been, we're going to build a new operating room, we want 10 rooms, we want all this other things, but we also got to figure out how to keep our current operating room working and getting cases done while we're doing this building, because it's 3 to 5 years from the time we say go to a new operating room getting built. In addition, you want to build a new operating room, it's almost a minimum of $4 million a room to build new facilities today if you've got the land or the footprint. So it's not easy building new bricks and mortar and building more capacity. So making sure that you're using every bit of what you have efficiently is always a short-term goal, even in facility projects.
And looking at those long-term goals, like you mentioned, the 3 to 5 year plan of constructing these additional facilities, what do you think we do well as an organization to really maintain those relationships? A few of the projects I've been on, this is the second or third time that organization has called us in to help them with something. What are some things that you spearhead to maintain those successful relationships with our clients?
Well, what I tell every consultant that comes in, you're going to make mistakes. You're going to go down the wrong path. It happens.
Just don't do it more than once.
But don't do it more than once, and never leave a client with a bad reference. I never want a bad reference. You do whatever you have to do to make sure that client is satisfied. Don't worry about the budget. Don't worry about the timeline. Make sure that client is satisfied. And that's always been a mantra of this company since it was founded in the 70s. No bad references. And while we do have 1 or 2, I am very proud to say that they number less than 4 out of the last 30 years. So that's the key, is making sure the client is satisfied, making sure the job is done. It isn't what's the minimum I have to do to get out of here and get paid. It's what do I have to do to ensure this client is satisfied with this project and is willing to tell their peers, hey, work with Sullivan because they do a great job. It's even things like not too long ago, I took a call from a client that we worked with 25 years ago. And they said, I got this problem. I don't know how to deal with it. Can you give me a proposal to fix it? And I said, I don't need to do a proposal. We don't need to do a project. Let's just talk about it right now. I can give you some ideas, some solutions. You're a client. You've got access to everything that Sullivan has to offer forever. And we spent an hour on the phone. They were incredibly satisfied. They fixed their problem. Did I not get a project? Probably. Do I have a satisfied customer that is going to tell lots of other people about what we've done for them and how we've helped them even 20 years after the project? Yeah, I will.
Yeah, that's phenomenal, especially in today's market where it's very much boom then bust. To maintain that level of success over such an extended, legitimately impressive.
There's a lot of consulting firms that never last more than 3 years, and we've been around 50.
It's impressive. And since we've been around 50, I'd love to pick your brain over where do you want to see us go in the next 5 or 10 years? What's your vision for the future of Sullivan and what we provide?
So I don't think we're ever going to get away from the core kind of come in and fix my operating room. We're always going to be doing some of that. And I think that will be a significant part of our business for a very, very long time. But the things that I see happening over the next 10 or 15 years, it's really going to be, I think anesthesia is going to drive a lot of that for the next 5 years until we figure out what the right level of capacity of anesthesia providers are. We're going to see tremendous improvements and changes in technology. You're going to see AI having a phenomenal impact on the operating room. Scheduling. I mean, it used to be you had a great scheduler, you had a great schedule. Now it's going to be some AI that's going to ask the questions to develop a predictive model of the schedule of exactly how this will fit together in the most efficient way that meets the level of care that we have to provide. We're going to see more predictive models about where a case should be done. Hey, you're not scheduling that in the main operating room. That's an ASC case. Let me look at your block day for the ASC and let's figure out how we do it over there. Let's figure out how we do it in this other site. Always looking to put that case in the least intensive, least expensive site possible to provide the level of care that patient needs. That's very, very different from, hey, Tuesday is my block day and I'm going to do everything. Whether it's a Ditzel case or a massive open heart, I'm going to do it all in my block. I think you're going to see a lot of that changing in terms of operationalizing more optimization strategies in the operating room. We're going to see technology evolving. Pre-COVID, very few total joints were done outpatient, same day discharge. I think we're going to be at 90% by the end of next year. We're already in the 70s. And I think you're going to be seeing more and more move to outpatient facilities, move out of main ORs in hospitals into ambulatory surgery centers where it's cheaper, faster, more patient convenience, and very little unpredictability about what we're going to be doing. So I think ambulatory surgery centers are going to continue to be a major growth area in the next 10 years. There's other things that could be happening that I just don't know. I mean, who could have foreseen COVID, in 2018, that would shut down operating rooms for months at a time? And then how did we deal with that? How did we start that back up? How did we regrow our surgical programs? Everybody learned on the fly during that.
I think I still learn on the fly every day. No, those are great points. And as we move towards wrapping this up, is there anything else you want to mention about Sullivan that we haven't covered, or any questions of me that I could possibly answer?
No, I don't think so. I think this has been a fairly comprehensive discussion. I love what Sullivan does. The fact that we have been able to make a change in the way surgery is delivered in this country and in other countries, I am very, very proud of. As we look at some of the things that we're doing, we make an impact. We are able to help hospitals take care of more patients with the funds that they have. We are able to improve the quality of care. We're able to improve the quality of the work life of the people that work in operating rooms. And I am incredibly proud of the people that work for me, the people that do this work, and the great work that they do. And I love talking to hospitals about their operating rooms and their surgery programs, and I would love to talk to you even more.
Well, thanks for your time, Randy. I appreciate it. Stay tuned, and we'll keep that momentum and keep cranking out some podcasts and giving good information.